I remembered his explicit instruction is don't go running your mouth to the press. So I remember that, and I decided to follow the letter of that. I wrote down on a notebook that I was carrying, secret meeting, ethics bill, Denmark Groover's office, after session, upon adjournment, or whatever the time was. And I carried it around in my hand, and I went over and visit my friends in the press corps, and I would talk to them and talk to them. Finally, they would like look and they'd, okay, and they'd nod at me, and I went around to all of them. By the time I went up to that meeting, there were 3 or 4 of them already there, and Groover was just about to blow his stack. But we had a very productive meeting. A lot of the BS that would have occurred, and me having to see, that was the key. If the author went along with gutting the bill, that saved everybody. They could say, well, look, the author. So I needed to maintain some bit of separativeness from them while they were trying to do this, and take the high ground and say, well, that stinks, that amendment. So we got that done that way, and we got out a pretty good restoration of some things, even though the House Judiciary Committee was gutting the bill for the most part. We get back to, and it also comes down to a point I realized of sheer timing. They know, the ones who have done this game so well know the literal value of timing. You've got to get things printed before you can debate them. Sometimes legislative counsel, you just can't find a lawyer in there to go ahead and do the changes. I became such an irritant, camping out in there, keeping people late, keeping people from going home to their wives and families. Just do it now, please. Keep the printers going, keep everything going. And I was holding up Judiciary Committee of, it's coming right now, those kind of things. At one point, I remember a member, and who I don't want to mention his name, who's not in the House anymore, came over, and I've got the doggone note. I get this note sent to me, and from something we were looking at in Judiciary. Ken, omissions on page 17, lines 16 and 20. What do you think about going back to $100 on page 8, 9, 11? There's been talk about Braves and Falcons tickets. They're wanting me to unilaterally change it before I submitted it. Not without benefit of the subcommittee that I had sweat bullets to get done. He just wanted me to sit and change it, so that we could still get Braves and Falcons tickets. And I'm saving this forever. and so it was funny that we got it through in some form. I got to Rules Committee. And before I went through Rules Committee, it was put upon me, we're going to let your bill out of rules. We're going to let your bill out. And see, I represented to them not much control, but more control than they got over the lieutenant governor and his bill, which had met mine, by the way, in terms of the process. And they said, what you've got to do is, you've got to oppose, as the author, any amendment attempts on the House floor. And I said, what do you mean? Vote against them? Yes, you've got to oppose them. Stand up and say, I oppose this amendment. And you've got to, be against it. And if you will do that, we will let you have it on the House floor. So at some expense that I'm still paying, I, again, adhered to the letter of that promise, but not to the spirit of it. I had a house full of people who had been reading the newspapers, hearing from their constituents about this guy trying to do this ethics bill, and they're coming to me all throughout the session saying, Ken, will you just get it to the House floor? We're going to restore all those good provisions. The thing was a skeleton, but I knew if we just kept a bill moving, the Senate would restore it. Mm-hmm. So I'm just, I'm saying, well, thanks, I appreciate it. Well, here I was faced with, to get the bill out, I had to go in there and basically be a part of the problem. Say, no, we don't want that really good provision that you've got, that I actually had in the original bill and thought enough of, and that I fought for up until yesterday, fought like a dog for, yet I'm having to tell you no. So basically what I did, and I went to the way the process works. An amendment is offered. Any objection, they look to the author. And then you can do through parliamentary inquiry, let known isn't it true that if this happened, it would be blah, 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 bad effect, or blah, 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 good effect. And, letting people know your reasons for whatever. Doug Teeper had a wonderful amendment about utilities, making a felony for utilities to give to regulating officers. And 2 or 3 other people had great amendments. So I would stand up and I would say, I object. And then they'd recognize me for elaboration, and I'd say, isn't it true that I object to this only technically and because of some commitments I made, but this is a wonderful idea. we ended up restoring some of it on the House floor with me happily voting no against it. All right. There we are, front page of the Atlanta paper. Passed the, House passed historic ethics measure, even though it's skeleton. They restored some of it on the floor. Oh my God. Later, we had a late night session, and after it was over with, everybody was just kind of lingering a little bit. And Elmore Thrash, who is the ancient messenger of the House, nice man, but he's real elderly. Right. He's like paged in 1916 or something, And he came by, and he's kind of crippled a bit with arthritis, and he came by and he kept saying, and I couldn't understand what he's saying. I just thought he was mumbling to himself. But he'd come by, did you hear me? And I said, what are you trying to say? The speaker wants to see you in his office. 15 minutes. There's the speaker was 20 feet away from me. Why couldn't he come and tell me that, or why couldn't he call me up or whatever? He's sending me the message. This was the first effort to contact me the entire session. I was persona non grata. I went in to that office, not really scared, but just kind of curious as to what did he have to say to me now, He started in on me. You've betrayed us. I don't know what happened to you, boy. I'll never forget this. I took you under my wing. We can't trust you, blah, blah, blah. And I sat down with him and I told him, I think, for the first of a couple of times that I've talked to him since, don't take any of this personally. I have motivations that are not political. I have motivations that are within me that I want to do this, and I think it's important that it be done. And he basically said, you want to, of course, here we were in the posture. This meeting happened, I recall now, after we had passed it, after I'd done that stunt. It's over in the Senate, and the Senate is restoring the hell out of the thing. The Senate is over there when they pass their version. They invite me over, and they all stand up and applause. I mean, that's real heady and all. I mean, it's the Georgia Senate, and that's, you're kind of got this playful kind of, back and forth with them. But the contrast of how I was treated between those two bodies was something that, you couldn't put into words. So here we were. And now the paper speculation was, generally the author of the bill gets to be on the conference committee. Right. And so, see, what that would have done was 3 senators, 3 House members, plus 1 who's going to be over there with the restorers, instant conference committee report. And Murphy had a problem. So that's why he called me into his office and started giving me this sermon. And he said, but he's a master of this. He's a master of giving you a crumb and making you feel like it is prime rib. He said, well, I'm thinking about putting you on that conference committee. And I said, really? And he said, yep, there's just some conditions. Here's how I'll put you on it. That you not say anything, and that you don't vote or suggest that there be a vote until your House colleagues are ready to vote, and that you only vote with them and not vote against them. And see, I think he knew that all along through this, I had technically kept my word. And I think he knows that I was a man of honor, which is the thing that they say you got to be down there. Never go back on your word. So I think he knew that if I promised him, yes, I will do this, he knew that I would do it. And he was not giving me any wiggle room this time. And so, again, Crum felt like prime rib, and I'd never been involved in this stage of the process yet with a bill. Realized retail divorcement, minor things never have to go through conference committees. The houses agree on them. This thing was hot. And so I guess I was just so proud to be called upon one and put upon one. I just said, well, I appreciate the offer. I'll let you know tomorrow. But I thought, gosh, I'm going to get to be on the conference committee. I've gotten this far, and in a way, they're still embracing me. My own House members are still embracing me. I go to the department about 1 a.m., and I call my wife, and she has the benefit of distance. And she said, and she's still really mad about the honeymoon thing. And she says, Ken, they're going to screw you bad. You know, don't fall for this. And it just was like, snap. I thought, you're right. You are absolutely right. So I went early that morning. My secretary wasn't even there. I typed up a memo to him politely declining being put on that conference committee. I didn't realize what a grenade that was, because what happened was, as long as they had the author agreeing with the gutting and the final death of a bill just because of stubbornness, that frees everybody up.
Right.
I realized to decline was saying, that's okay, I'm going to stay out here with the press and pummel the hell out of whatever, the people who don't let this thing come out. By this time, the paper is listing the conferees by name and their telephone numbers. And they got in there and they had no chance. Three House conferees were Tommy Chambliss, Boyd Pettit, and Tommy Chambliss, Boyd Pettit, and God, who was the third? This is terrible. Boyd Pettit was the replacement for me. Charles Thomas. Boyd Pettit was the replacement for me.
Okay.
And they got in there and they were in agony. The House members were in agony because really it informally was focused on those three and the Speaker. And let me tell you, all of these games we play, I think everybody goes down there with good motivations and good intentions. And I think it reached in Chambliss and Pettit and Thomas that they finally had to go and tell the Speaker, we have got to do this, and we have got to do it in this fashion. And they came out and they hammered out a good bill. And in the final night of the session, after I'd introduced it in the first hour of the session, we pull out the ethics bill and pass it in both houses. One of the casualties along the way was, I might add, during the appropriations process, we were due a new welcome center up here.
I just drove.
Yeah.
Right.
Did you go that far?
No, I guess I passed the one on exit 136, but it's the other one. Yeah.
This is one right out below Tennessee.
Yeah. Okay.
And terrible. It was built in the 60s. They've expanded the freeway up to where it's right up next to it. We've had vehicles go down and nearly hit people, run off the road. Very much needed. Was really an industry and trade project that I had not done that much for up to that point.
Right.
But just the fact that on the appropriation sheet it said Ringgold on it, in one fell swoop, I'd been asking them to enhance the funding to the State Ethics Commission because of these new duties the bill was giving them. And in one swoop, in one night, they took the money from the Ringgold Welcome Center. Well, in the past, I've noticed when that happened to people, they would stick their tail between their legs and just kind of whimper off and fade away. And I wasn't going to let that happen. I didn't know what was going to happen, but I knew that I was going to scream about it.
Right.
So we made an issue of it at some political risk to me, because it is a admission that, hey, I may be jeopardizing some things,
In my district, right.
Yeah, and they ate him alive for it, and the governor restored the funds for it.
I remember that.
After the fact, after the session.
The special governor's discretionary
Yeah,
fund.
I mean, discretionary fund, which is usually doled out in $5,000 and $7,000,
right.
he pumps out
$200,000.
$200,000, and wow. So, so that was kind of the end of that. Nathan, the three Senate conferees were, guy named Jake. Oh God, this is terrible. I know my senators and these guys are good friends, but I'm just drawing a blank. Jake Pollard, the guy who's a grocer down in South Georgia, real nice guy, and then Nathan Deal. And what's interestingly enough is one of the candidates for U.S. Congress who was in the Senate that time started a rumor that I was doing this only to run for the congressional seat. He was running for that seat. And I was telling him and everybody else, no, I'm not. No, I'm not. I finally found a believer in Nathan Deal. And I said, I know you're interested in this. And you have in your hands my legislation that would, of course, be a great centerpiece for another campaign. But I am telling you, and I'm giving you my word and looking in your eyes, I am not going to run. And if you can help me out with this, I'm going to support you for this, because I knew where everybody else was, stabbing me in the back. Nathan, I think that sold me on his character at that point. He said, okay. At one point during the process, they were in conference committee and they were sweating out and they were just about to compromise and go for something and demand something. And Nathan was starting to feel how this could affect either way his bid for Congress at this point, maybe negatively if they didn't pass it.
Right.
So at one point he said, well, we're either going to make you and me political heroes or political debris or something, something to that effect. And they went on and did a great job with it. Since then,
which is in some ways the more interesting question.
Yes, since
as
then.
Interesting as this has been.
Since then, that's true, and probably what you really came to get. Since then, I get my timeline right. That was 92.
Right.
Went on through 92. Got out of the session in 92, and it was just so disgruntled at what was going on. Got a call from Dubose Porter, who I think at the time was just fishing for what would you think if I was running for speaker? By the end of the conversation, I had him running for speaker, definitely, and let's see what we can put together. I'm on board 100%. And I think very legitimately. I don't think I won. I had no reason to be vindictive. I won the ethics battle with Murphy. He proved to be vulnerable in the sense that he's something that he was working openly against, got passed over his head. So I didn't feel a vindictiveness on him. I got the Welcome Center money. I just felt the need to move on, because if that were going to be the case on that bill, and of course I was still smarting a little bit from the way they treated me personally. And I
didn't you get busted from a committee?
I got busted from a committee officership.
Or is that later? That's after the Porter.
Yeah, that was after the Porter thing. And let me tell you, the Porter thing, I would do it again, even knowing the result. That was, I think it has caused some of the most interesting and philosophically challenging times in the House. And Dubose is a wonderful person. The only regret that most of us have for Dubose is that he did not taste blood enough to push it to January and to make every one of us put on a recorded vote whether they were going to go with the old or the new. And I think that's what was lacking. And it since then, of course, we ran straight up issues related race. it's not documented because of secret ballots, so to speak, but there is no secret ballot in the House. As I learned in the DOT caucuses when I was close to the leadership, we were to sit in certain areas and either serve as spotters or show someone our vote discreetly. You know, to enjoy the spoils of leadership every now and then, you got to prove that you're with them. And in a secret ballot DOT vote, you're supposed to designated who you're supposed to show your vote to. I remember later in one that I was trusted enough to be the one who people show their votes to, and one guy, he so badly didn't want to show me his vote. He's running for governor now. He was like, he kept moving, and I'd move and sit down kind of near him, and he'd stand up and go move again. I mean, I really feel bad for being a part of that process for a short time that I was, but since then, you know, we failed in the attempt to beat Murphy. Dubose was just demoralized and just could not imagine putting he and his family through from November to January as a, you know, a so-called independent candidate. Mm-hmm. So he just says, no, we're not doing it. Well, that left us, I thought, in a vulnerable situation. So I called Dubose and we talked and said, you know, the issues have not died. The issues are still there. The slush fund was there. We can't deny that. To vote to put the speaker back in, we can't say, okay, well, we failed in replacing the person, so therefore we're adopting all of these policies and we're forgetting all of the problems. So we developed the Reform Caucus in the House. And, you know, it has got 12 strong members. And I think that's significant in a body our size. Mm-hmm. You know, when you got 12 votes that you know are there on a reform issue, and at any given time you're going to get, you may make an issue enough, politicize it enough that you'll get the entire minority party and maybe some disgruntled segments of the majority party at any given issue. So here we were throwing these kind of issues up. 93 was fascinating because that was our year of the Reform Caucus. Right. And the House Ethics Committee was formed. You know, they were reacting to my ethics bill the year before and the call for a need of that. But they were first wanting it to be like this star chamber court. I mean, it was going to be bad and used kind of wrongly, I think, just by the people who were in status quo. You know, they were going to punish people who said derogatory things about the House. They were going to punish people, it said, who made derogatory comments about the House. It was in print. I couldn't believe I was reading it. So we attacked that and got that neutralized, even though I'm, you know, since I've tested that committee to see what exactly its constitution is. But I think the thing that I am going to remind my constituents this year, a snapshot of where the House is right now, even now, maybe a little better now, but the last day of the 1993 session, we had an amendment. By the way, we forced, this sounds technical, but it's extremely important. The Rules Committee of the House met on the very morning that things were going to be brought up. That has an incredible imbalancing effect on you and your legislation and your momentum and your constituency, who wants to know when's it going to be up, or when can we do this, or when can we have these prepared, or when can we peak our lobbying effort. As long as the Rules Committee was deciding the very day, and they could pull it back or throw it in just to get the pressure off them, throw it in at a time when it was not good. We forced them. We didn't have to come down to a vote, but we got them to concede to start making the Rules Committee meet the day before.
Right, I remember that. Okay.
One of the first effects of that was an appropriations bill, not the budget bill, but an appropriations bill was coming through that was germane to an amendment we had for fair and open grants, which would have eliminated slush funds.
I remember that.
And of course, to say slush fund was blasphemy, but we were saying it loudly, and we were saying, we're going to stop the slush funds. And we had a bill to that effect, and the bill was going nowhere. So we prepared an amendment. And because of knowing the day before, I got debosed, and we decided to go and draw up this amendment quietly. And because Poston and Porter seemed to have flags all over it whenever our names appeared on these reform amendments, we selected the nicest, easygoing person in our reform group, and that's Henrietta Turnquist.
Sure.
And we put Turnquist's name on the top of it. And it became known as the Turnquist Amendment, and it quietly was slipped in, and we started working the floor. We passed it. But we passed it over their objection. We passed it 86-80. And we ran over to the Senate this last day of the session, and we put it to Pierre Howard. We said, look, if you're going to hold out for some thing that you wanted in this bill, you're going to throw it in a conference committee, and they're going to kill it. If you will just agree to it as is, just swallow hard and agree to it as is, we have ended slush funds in this state, and you can take some credit for it. And he did. They passed it. I mean, it absolutely blew them away in House leadership, because they thought they had another shot at shooting it down in the conference committee, which the Speaker appoints. So I think the snapshot that I was talking about was at the very hour that we were working the floor, getting ready to do this, some members of the House, including at least one member of leadership, was bringing a sex toy on the House floor and calling children over to the desk and showing it to them. And I think that is more telling about a moment in time, a moment in the life of the House of Representatives. Look what this group's doing over here, and look what this group is doing over here. And I didn't realize that, of course, until later in '93, when I get the call from the GBI in July that says, by the way, you sit over in Section A. Did you see anything unusual on the House floor? And I'm thinking, what did I not see that's unusual on the House floor? We got corruption, No, I didn't say that, but that's what I thought. I laughed. And he told me what happened, and I thought, oh, no, I'm not laughing anymore. He said, well, we just didn't know if you'd seen anything. Well, again, it was one of those defining moments in my political life. After I talked to him, I thought, all right, the usual thing to do when you hear about these kind of things is turn your head. But I had a very urgent reason to catch the person. If it was generally unknown and happened in Section A, there is a staffer in the Speaker's office who I think would have tried to infer it must have been Poston. I mean, it was a very selfish reason. One was that I wanted the son of a bitch caught that was doing that, because I didn't want it to be undefined who in Section A would do it. There's only about 18 people in Section A, and I was the least liked of all of them, So I wanted to push this thing and push it hard. And I realized that pushing it had chugged on since the last day of the session.
Right.
Nobody knew about it. And I remember telling the GBI agent, I said, is this public? He said, no, but it probably will be soon. I thought, okay, that's good enough. And by God, it was public at that point. And here we have a situation where a mother brings a child back. This had happened to him. They started interviewing other children. It had happened to them. Some of them thought it was funny. One little girl thought it was real. It has amazed me how reality and perception have parted on that issue, with the status quo giving the impression of, oh, it's just an isolated incident and that kid didn't mean to see it. The GBI report has half a dozen kids that came in contact one way or another with that item. And one was upset, thought it was real, blah, blah, blah. And yet the Speaker's office, and I'm not saying the Speaker, but the Speaker's office absolutely keeps that issue completely covered up, away from law enforcement authorities for 2 months, while they try to kind of take care of their own from within. And that's another snapshot, I think, of what's wrong in the legislature, is the behind the scenes, the administration of it. And that's why I still think we have got to have as much as we should praise anyone who can remain speaker for 20 years and give him a gold watch and send him on, I do think we need to give him the gold watch and send him on now, because it is so different than what Georgians are demanding right now from their government, from the attitude down to the action, and it really is disturbing. And I have never slept better than since 1991 when I had my turnaround. I've never had a lack of sleep or a lapse of conscience because of my political life now, and I feel real good about that.
Filed the complaint in the sex apron.
Mm-hmm. And I filed a complaint against an unknown member of the House, and I had I practiced law, and I had a case in Colorado when they were first starting to hear it, and it occurred to me in Colorado that, well, things started coming out that other people, adults, had seen it with the legislator who eventually took the rap for bringing it. And what's really kind of sad is he was one member of leadership that actually I got along with best, really, other than like Groover. He was one who I think recognized the problems in the political issues, and that, or at least he was gracious enough to identify. So I was saddened that it was him, but I couldn't control that it was him, and yet they will take the attitude that I could have controlled, because in their sense I could have controlled it by keeping my damn mouth shut, and so that's why they're a bit at odds. But it's amazing how many spouses of legislators will pull me off to the side and say, I really appreciate you doing that. I really do appreciate you doing that. That needed to be done. Our children go down there all the time. And so one of my first reactions also was, I have children down there all the time from Catoosa County. Sure. And I didn't know that one of them might not have seen that. And that would have been the most embarrassing thing in the world for a child to come back to Catoosa County and say, well, listen to what they do down there.
What was your take about how the hearings actually sort of proceeded? I thought one of the things that was interesting is Jojo Lay was brought in.
Yeah.
So maybe you could sort of talk about sort of how your take on sort of how it actually played out.
Yeah, I went to some of them. I just I felt like, hey, this is something. I realize now that was probably not taken that very well. But I just was absolutely. I wanted to see how the committee worked, and like it works, unfortunately, and yet you can't blame anybody individually. You have to blame the institution. It works like the other committees there. They're sitting there dwelling, and then all of a sudden somebody goes, well, I think we ought to take an afternoon break. I got to go get a drink or something, get a Coke or something. And they came back with a typewritten motion of here's how they should handle it, and it was so classic present day House of Representatives. It was a prearranged, we'll take a break here and then we'll produce this 3-page typewritten thing that just came up to us while we were drinking a Coke, So, they did as little as they had to do, but they had to do something. But they absolutely pushed the limits of minuscule action, because they did as little as they felt like they had to do and still survive. And the next test of them, and this was absolutely, I guess I was just a wild man on this one, but Murphy threatening the state lawyer for his client not getting a good break. Now, this is something that is very near and dear to me, because I'm a lawyer. I work up here on cases where occasionally I will have a state agency that is on an opposite side of the issue than I am. We're prohibited from litigating against state agencies, but sometimes they're the ones evaluating a person or a client or a victim, as it was in this case. And I've been very careful, just because I think it is a local political time bomb to be throwing your weight around at the courthouse. So I've deferred many times, and had clients probably move on to another lawyer out of thinking, well, you're going to have to tear into this or whatever. So that's something I was already very personally familiar with, is the carefulness you had to conduct yourself with. This young lady in Cobb County who worked over in Dallas, Georgia, had been I knew the style so well, and that when I heard it happen and Bowers jumped on Murphy, I guess it was kind of presumptuous of me to bring the complaint on that one. I didn't have the personal connection
with the case
as I did as being a member of Section A of the House floor. So I can understand more the mainstream disgruntlement of me being again the one leading the charge, and maybe that diminished it to some degree and politicized it to some degree. That's something I need to be careful of.
What was the sequence, or what sort of informed your decision to take the lead on that one?
I think someone called me. I know what it was. The girl that happened to had gone to law school with Doug Teeper. Doug didn't finish law school, but he went for some time at Georgia State, and he knew her. I think there was some contact there, and then we all ended up calling her and saying what happened. We were interested, and quite frankly, I plead guilty to the fact that we need to expose anything that will cause a change in that leadership, and so we did it, and I think it was completely valid, and the committee just absolutely shut down. They weren't going to do this at all. They were not going to do this. So I think I've matured enough to think that I'll know when to let somebody else handle something. Sometimes I don't regret doing it, because the guy's got to be reminded every now and then, you're not the king. You're someone who is supposed to conduct yourself in these certain ways, and decline in other ways. So, but
it was quite an experience to go through. I mean, I kind of remember it from this last January.
Yeah, and you know what? I think that I've lived the complete spectrum. To where if the guy belched, I would shake. To where now I just see him as an interesting kind of an artifact of a time that Georgia's left. Yet, we really just can't remove him very easily. And so that you take more of a trivial approach to him at that point. I'm going to be respectful of him in his duties, but I'm not going to cause that to be a worship. And that was that at first, and it was very, as I hope I've revealed to you, I think innocently fallen into,
right.
And I got myself into it by the way I conducted my first election, and then I broke out of it for. I'm not a person who believes it.
In terms of actual practical politics, in terms of strengthening ethics legislation and making sure that it works and backing it up and so forth, then what's your assessment of where the process has come to this point and where it needs to go, and
Well, I think let me say some good things about Tom Murphy. He is a player enough that he knows when to fold. And he knows how to fold in a fashion that it doesn't look like a fold. It's called preemptive strike. And we had a thing that during the formation of the Reform Caucus that Ray Holland had drawn up. Ray is the more meticulous in detail of anybody I know. I jokingly say that he's anal retentive, but he's really a great legislator, does a great job. About the best thing in South Georgia in terms of just ability and professionalism. But Ray puts it in ink. Multi-page thing that we jokingly call the Holland Manifesto, which set out the problems in the house. And it was Ray's justification for being for DuBose, but we all adopted it as the cause, and with suggestions. It's incredible. I wish I will get you a copy of it. It's incredible how much of that has been done. Timing of the Rules Committee meeting,
Right.
Grant Fair and Open Grant Reform Act. It's incredible how much of that's been done. And we issued it. We sent it to them. Very quietly, they did it under their own name. And that's fine. If you know, somebody said if you don't care who takes credit for it, you can get a hell of a lot done. And Teeper, as a postscript here, Teeper got the Holland Manifesto from Ray and copied it and distributed it on the House floor this year, saying, look what we've done. You know, thanks to all of us working together, look what we've done. Ray went through the roof. Ray did not want. Ray's the more cautious of the reformers. You know, he and you can't say that either one of us is totally right and totally wrong in our style and approach. It just happens.
Strategies and tactics.
Yeah, and Ray is more of a conciliator, and that has served him very well. I am more of a. Somebody told we got a lot of people writing papers. Because I think the Reform Caucus, not bragging, but I think it's one of the most interesting things. It's about like the train wreck in Graysville as a child. Not many interesting things happen in the House, and you know, in terms of the political makeup, until we had this kind of uprising. You know, the last one was Burris when he ran for Speaker. Right. Well, this was something that was continuing. Hey, it wasn't just a DuBose Porter for Speaker. This thing's got wheels. It's keeping on moving around and traveling around with its message. And Teeper distributed it around, and Ray got all mad that he did it without his permission. And but the message was there. We've done a lot for this house, either by doing it ourselves or being the force that was coming that caused it to be done. And so, in a sense, I've got to look at Murphy at a step back and look at him from a further distance and say, well, you know, no matter if he's doing that, then we're going along fine. And overall, we are. I mean, in terms of where we've come from ethics, from the ethics standpoint, where we've come from 1988 when I went in, we've come an incredible long way. And the attitudes have changed now. They know now that the club that is the House of Representatives is no longer a discreet, quiet club that you can do anything in and feel comfortable that the rest of the world, the media, is not going to know. And I think that is an unwritten thing that is important. That's very important. That so many people get so caught up into it, and I have felt these urgings that, hey, I belong to one of the most exclusive clubs in this state, and you know, if I can play the cards right and be low key, maybe my people will keep on making me a member of the club, and then if I stay long enough and don't die, I may get to be a chairman one day, in which the real things start rolling in. You know, the slush fund. You know, the slush fund over 8 years, $3.1 million. Over a third of it went to the districts of the Speaker and the Appropriations Chair. That's wrong. That's just wrong.
Where did the Republicans fit in? I mean, the class of
Nowhere.
'93 was
nowhere.
Let me tell you, as this new.
Let me tell you what. I have never been so. I realize why nothing has changed up to now. The Republicans have many more in number than the Reform Caucus does.
Yeah,
5 times the number.
Of the
and are growing. It is amazing the lack of energy that has gone into any kind of true reform. It is a comfortable, I don't know, an angle of repose, so to speak, that it's just at rest. And even though they're growing, it's just happening because of things going on outside the legislature, because the legislature sure as hell is not inspiring it. Inspiring it.
Right.
It's growing because of trends that are going on outside the legislature. It's not growing because we want you to go down there and change. They are comfortable to blast Tom Murphy, go back to their districts and explain, we put up these meaningless amendments, and we put up these outrageously partisan things that have no chance, and we couldn't pass it because it's a Democratic majority in that House down there, and Tom Murphy won't let this kind of stuff happen. That's a comfortable thing.
Well, yeah, but it's kind of curious in a way, because you'd think, in a sense, that they'd see this opportunity as an opportunity for growth and influence, and
the Reform Caucus.
No, the Republicans. They'd see that this as a
If they have it slow, they've got some.
But you're saying they're really not entering into alliances and not really doing the trench work that.
No, they've got their internal problems, I think, with the far right.
Right.
So that's kept them to some degree. But I'm frustrated in where in the hell have they been up to now? Before the far right came along, they had a lot more than 12 people.
Right.
And I guess the thing is, you've got some Republicans that are bigger Murphy loyalists than some of the Democrats, and who knows what the background is that has caused that. But they can hardly do anything for one or two of them going and running and telling the speaker. I literally met with, before the filing of the complaint on the lawyer threatening, I actually sat down with some of the wilder Republicans saying, look, if we do this, it needs to be a bipartisan effort. Before the meeting was up, two of them ran over, looks like school kids, ran over and sat down with him and got stroked a little bit and got a crumb and told him the whole story.
Well, what are sort of the next steps, in terms of, both...
When's this going to be published?
It's up to you. I meant in terms of both, building upon what's been done so far, and both in terms of specifics and making sure it works.
Ironically, this will date this
right.
effort of yours, and this is to the point where we're going beyond recording of the past to what will seem like interesting speculation of the future when we look at it a couple of years from now. But every one of the Reform Caucus, the active Reform Caucus members, got primary opposition.
Old tradition, right? Yeah.
Oh no, hell no! This came out of Atlanta. It is proven. Mine was proven to have come out of Atlanta. And what's kind of sad is, and I think it's just a phenomenon that takes place. We had a huge freshman class this last time.
Right.
And, there is a kind of a informal thing in Georgia that you let the freshmen have a couple of terms to have a chance before you start running people against them. And so that's what we're experiencing now, is a large part of the House is unopposed. And then we've got these white hat guys that I'd like to call us. We're all opposed. And it's interesting. I've gone around to help. I went over to one of my colleagues in the mountains, and I've constant phone contact with DuBose and some of the other ones who are the reformers. And it's amazingly how consistent the theme is. These folks have gotten down there and they've shook things up to the effect that they can't help you anymore. And what's interesting is, the truth is, there have been informal reforms that weren't of political nature, in terms of DOT being tied to the motor fuel tax and not controlled by the House budget and the original budget. That's the most wonderful thing we've ever done from my perspective now. Also, these state departments are doing, through fair and open grants, the political angle is diminished.
Right.
And I think that's what's happening. It is no longer we're going to send so and so down there because they can bring home the bacon, because the bacon is pork from another person's taste. And it's just not going to be the case. That percentage of the budget is tiny that they play with.
Right.
It really is. As big as, I got to tell you a funny story. There was when we talk about budget, and I want to go back in our conversation, but if I ever write a book, this scene has got to be in it, because this was the first eye-opening disillusionments I ever had. And there's no telling how many I was part of where I had my eyes closed, that I disillusioned. You could not see the disillusionment because I was turning the other cheek.
Right.
There was a kid from up here who was an intern, and my first year, and she was went down and got on some internship, and ended up to being staffer for someone. And I was so into this new world that I went to every meeting. That budget week, Ray Holland and I and Doug Teeper and another guy named Ron Fennell, we became known as the Four Horsemen because we ran together all the time. Ironically, we were the most blessed by the speaker, I guess is why we got some notoriety. Teeper, fascinating background, radical in college. I knew him from when he ran for Congress when I was a law student in Athens. Got 10% of the vote against Bernard, wasn't it? Against Doug Bernard.
Yeah.
And but he was a great guy. We were interested in the same things. We vaguely knew. I knew him more than he knew me. I was just a law student. Ray Holland, I knew from his brother and I were law school classmates.
Okay.
Ron Fennell and I vaguely knew each other from Young Democrats.
Right.
I think with Ron and Ray and I, in the class of 88, 89, I think the thing that immediately, I've told you what I thought boosted me up in the eyes of the empowered, was the way I'd conducted myself getting there and the numbers that I brought there in terms of vote. The thing that I think kept us three there was the fact that we were born male and white. Because of our 13, we were the youngest white males who seemed to have some political experience. And so we were kind of, hey, you're kind of brought up. Teeper had a lot further to go because he was Jewish and is Jewish. And I think Teeper had to, so to speak, and I've teased him about this, so to speak, sell the act a little harder. Teeper started wearing a cowboy hat and holding an unlit cigar in his mouth. I'll never forget how, he was one of the boys too. And so we were all just brought up, and we were sucking up it's so embarrassing to think how much we were brought in. So about this time, we are also if there was any competition among the four of us, it was very healthy. I don't remember it was all, hey, come on, I got invited to this. Okay, yeah, well, I got invited to this, and you didn't, that kind of stuff. But I remember the four of us stayed that budget week. We were freshmen. We had no business, really, and really, when you look at how much an actual House member has to do with the budget, we were wasting everyone's time, but we were learning the process. I was constantly on the budget staff. Hey, can you ever sit down with me and tell me how this works? Yeah, one of these days. They didn't want anybody knowing how it worked. They don't.
Right.
I was put off forever, even when I was among the blessed. So, but I remember this young girl ended up working closely with some of the leaders. And I remember that I had the endurance that I stayed longer than even my buddies. And I was staying, and God, they're going into smaller and smaller rooms where the press is more and more uncomfortable being there. And then finally they go into the so-called green door. Well, I went in too. Why the hell not? I'm thinking, we do have an open records, Open Government Act. And here comes the key blessed staffers. and here's this constituent of mine. Hey, she's in there too. That's interesting, you know. And she's come along well, and here I am here with the whole process. Bubba McDonald tapped me on the shoulder and said, "You need to go." Everybody's kind of grinning at me, just like, "Oh, what a nice young, aggressive young puppy we've got, but we need to put him out now. You know, he's not house trained yet." And I'm saying, "What do you mean? You know, y'all about to go eat or something?" No, you can't be in on this part. And it just, as I walked out, I looked, and here's a 19-year-old constituent of mine who is getting to stay just because she happens to be close to one of the staffers. I mean, one of the leaders. And that was I will never forget that feeling. I was sent down here by 35,000 constituents, and I was having to leave a room where their budget was being discussed. And that slapped, that I guess was the first shot across my bow that I realized, you know, when it comes down to which direction, whenever I have the ability to, you know, and I think the retail divorcement experience, the ethics bill experience, the personal experiences with diabetes and things, that just absolutely cemented it all together, all these experiences that I remembered. Sorry I didn't put it into context in the proper chronological order, but that was my freshman year.
Of the process.
And that I don't know if you expected to get all this flotsam and jetsam with all of this, but it has, every bit of it has to do with where we are today in terms of where I am today.
Absolutely.
And a lot to do with where, you know, the other Reform Caucus members have they've suffered the indignities, they've seen the highs and the lows, and they've seen the injustices.
Somebody like Henrietta Turnquist, it's also going against much of the Black Caucus, and you know, I mean, it's
and she and Henrietta Candy are extremely upset with their colleagues in the Black Caucus, and I am too, quite frankly. We're absolutely amazing.
But then it dovetails, it overlaps with these other issues, the welfare reform issue, and the governor and the speaker fighting on that. And I mean, it's amazing. It's not in isolation from all these other dynamics in the session.
If Tom Murphy should ever be honored, it should be just for the ability to. Well, before I say that, you can do a lot with putty. And that's what he's had to work with for a long time. Are people who would allow themselves to be molded in these fashions. And what he's got in the putty now are a few rocks. And you know, he can't mold us. And we're staying in there. And we're trying to hook up together so that we start becoming a larger part of the putty, trying to harden some of the other putty so that it can't be so easily. If we're going to be malleable by any means, it should be from the district. That's what's lacking. And some of the things that we've accomplished are the dumb luck of timing. Some of them, I think, are the enhanced information systems that are now available, communication systems. 2 or 3 people have told me, sometimes without the friendliest tone, if it weren't for the media, you'd be dead. And I think I agree with that. If I had tried the ethics bill 5 years before, when the issues weren't out there, they got the people in the media decided, hey, the people are interested in this issue, man, I'd have been knocked down, and then I'd have probably just faded on into obscurity.
You know, another question I have is, how have the lobbyists tried to kind of get around the new
they have.
And with what kind of success, and then how do you do that? And also the whole issue of campaign contributions, and sort of how are people trying to get around that?
Well, it's amazing. We've tried additional campaign reforms, and we've accomplished some of them. And TEPR, for example, got the bill passed where PACs have to name. They can't hide behind these euphemistic names like Fund for Better Government. Right. You know, your constituents, when they look at your disclosure report, well, it's good that the Fund for Better Government's for them. They don't know that it's for some bank or some industrial, waste depositor or something, that got their PR company to think up of some great name for their PAC. So we passed that, and we got they keep tinkering, and what I think is what is frustrating, and this is something that I find hard to do with. I think it cheapens the whole system and the whole process to show how we often react with the power of the legislative branch of government to address an issue that is so having to do with an individual personality or a personality of a position. For example, because Tom Murphy hates Mike Bowers, the Attorney General's office on salary has now slumped way below that of the rising ones of the Supreme Court and Court of Appeals.
Right.
The speaker got a nasty editorial because while he was holding back my ethics bill, he runs through one with his name on it, which allows for one term only us to take contributions during the session. And who that was to help was the sitting members of the Georgia legislature that wanted to run for Congress that year. And hey, we couldn't let them be at a disadvantage from those outsiders out there, you know. So we're going to change the law to where they can take money during the session.